Okay, there we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Taryn, and I'm one of the knowledge and research leads at the Center for Innovation in Campus Mental Health, or CICMH, as we call it. I'm really excited for this webinar today. If you're here to see the Somebody Has to Be Me, Co-Creating Space for Identity Exploration webinar. If you're not here for this webinar, well, I hope you still stay anyway. But really, really exciting stuff coming up. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that while we are here in a virtual session, we are joining in from many ancestral lands of various Indigenous communities. I am currently in Toronto, Treaty 13 territory, and the home of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, and people who may still be unrecorded. I believe that it is my duty to, acknowledge the effects of colonialism that we still see today, and also the colonialism that has occurred in the past, and just to actively think about the ways I'm potentially participating in it, and actively push back against it as well. So while we're going through this webinar, I want you to think about how you might be able to support your Indigenous students and your colleagues within your role and to promote a whole campus approach to health and wellness. I also invite you to check out our own work, the CICMH. We have done some work. Well, I say we, but it's really our Indigenous knowledge and research lead who has done some great work on the needs of Indigenous students and staff, and there's a plethora of information on our website, so feel free to check that out. So I also want to go over some housekeeping, just so folks know there is closed captioning. You can turn that on. It will be at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to turn on French closed captioning. You just have to make sure that you set your speaking language to English and then the translated language to French. The chat function is open to share your thoughts and reactions. Please keep it respectful and kind for everyone. And then we will have a Q&A at the very end. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just put it in the Q&A function, and we will get to those at the end. I also want to remind folks that there will be a post-webinar survey. I will put it in the chat when we're closing to the end, but it will also pop up when you leave the webinar. So we would love to hear your thoughts. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our guests here. We're joined by Bonnie Perdota from Ontario Tech University and Mary Cronert from the LivingRoom Studios. So over to you. I will stop sharing right now so you can share. Okay, there we go.
Okay. How's it looking?
It looks great.
Thank you, Mary, for doing the screen share and the slide transfer. Welcome, everyone, to Somebody Has to Be Me, co-creating space for identity exploration. Mary, you'll do a land acknowledgement of where we're joining from.
Yes, so Taryn, thank you so much for that beautiful land acknowledgement. But of course, there are many of us gathering and participating from many different lands and territories. So for us, we are located in Oshawa, which are the lands of the lands and the people of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. And the lands we are situated on are covered under the Williams Treaties and the traditional territories of the Mississauga, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, including Algonquin, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. These lands remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people, artists and students alike. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. Just a brief acknowledgement of that. And wherever you are participating from today, perhaps you might want to enter it into the chat or just reflect on it as we continue with this webinar.
Yeah, we would love to know where you're joining from. That would be, if that feels comfortable for you.
All right, so introduction times. So my name is Mary Cronert, and my pronouns are she, her, they, them, and I'm an art therapist and the founder of the Living Room Community Art Studio, which is a Durham region-based art hive that supports opportunities for free and low-cost art making and sharing for everyone. Bonnie?
And yes, thank you. I am Bonnie Pedota, and I use she and her pronouns. I work with Ontario Tech University's mental health services, and my role is mental health and wellness facilitator. I'm also an educator. My first our second degree is in education, and so I'm really happy to be here today. My main role at the university is mental health intake, so that's the majority of my role, but I also every semester get to do a side gig, a group or something. So I've had the great pleasure of working with Mary for the last 2 semesters on our art workshops, which we are going to share with you today.
Yeah, so we're going to do a little deeper dive into that. But before we get there, we'd also like to introduce the folks who weren't able to be here today presenting with us, people without which this project could not have happened. Bonnie, take it away.
Yes, so we will get a little bit more into our collaborations. So we just want to acknowledge the energy and the spirit of these individuals who informed our planning and the delivery of our workshop. So we have on the very left Funmi, who's a PhD student and works for our team as a mental health peer mentor, a senior peer mentor. We have Sienna Smith from our equity and engagement team, and her role is a health promotion coordinator. We have Jocelyn Peltier, who is working with Indigenous Education and Cultural Services. Her role is Indigenous and Cultural Advisor. And Mary, you'll introduce
Um,
us.
yeah, and this slide has gone a bit wonky on me, of course, so I will make sure to correct that in what we share with folks. And finally, Miles Horton, who is a mixed and multimedia artist, post-secondary student themselves, and a living room volunteer. So a little history then on the partnership between the Living Room Community Art Studio and Ontario Tech University. We first began taking the art bus to campus during the pandemic, nearing the end of 2022. And this was to support students in basically returning to experiences of in-person engagement, providing opportunities for them to get to know one another and become comfortable again on campus through creative social interaction. Out of that, we recognized that there was a significant need for mental health supports through arts, that students were really responding to it in a meaningful way. So that's when we deepened the partnership with Ontario Tech Student Mental Health Services with the support of CICMH through a seed partnership grant in 2023 that enabled us to open what we called the Creative Wellness Hive. The Creative Wellness Hive allowed us to provide weekly or monthly, depending on the funding that we had at the time or have, for our drop-in groups on campus, provided by the Living Room and overseen by myself and peer mental health supporters from Ontario Tech's Student Mental Health Services. On average, we tend to see between 50 and 75 people joining us, visiting us to participate in these workshops. Now, not all of them are there for what we'd say mental health support, although they find the art making incredibly therapeutic. However, we are seeing approximately 15 to 25 students who return consistently week after week, who are using this as a component of their mental health management. And for them and for myself, this is where we really begin to explore the issues and bridge the gaps between what student mental health services can offer and the lives that students are leading rather.
Right. So we had our seed grant a few years back, and the Creative Wellness Hive has been running in our library once a month or once a week, depending on how much funding is going on. And in the meantime, I had a really magical experience happen to me. I had joined an online 2S LGBTQ plus group for adults, making art, learning coping skills through art, empowerment through art. And even though it was an online group, I noticed that every day after the group, I would wake up and I'd think to myself, what magic was that? And I started to think about, like, what was that? What happened? And I realized that having a protected space for a marginalized group, where there was art making, somehow there was this alchemy of protected space, of kindness, of art making, of creativity. So I mentioned this to my manager and said, I want to bring this to students. I just find this to be really therapeutic and magical. And so my manager said, actually, CICMH is inviting applications for partnership grants where we might be able to actually scale our creative wellness hive to offer something a little bit more niche, a little bit more specific. So last summer, Mary and I put together an application to scale our creative wellness hive to offer specific workshops for equity deserving groups on campus. So we proposed that we would offer, you'll hear a little bit more about our process and what happened, but we wanted to offer specific workshops for BIPOC students, for Indigenous students, for 2S LGBTQIA students, and for neurodiverse students. So we imagined these would be similar to my experience, closed groups. We were hoping for in person, but you'll see the best laid plans sometimes have little, bumps and curves. And so you'll hear a little bit about what happened to the greatest plan that we had. So I think, yeah, next slide, I think.
Indeed. And so just before we get to the creative coping workshops and how they became the art of me, we want to touch upon the specific underlying needs that we probably all are aware of that students are facing. So part of it is that, we know that mental health challenges often emerge in young adulthood, making these post-secondary spaces and opportunities to identify and address those needs so important. But we also know that student mental health services in many places are overwhelmed with just the demand for services. So delays in access from intake to actually seeing a counselor can be 4 to 6 weeks sometimes. And this creates barriers for students accessing support. These barriers increase for students who are already coping with experiences of racism or cis heterosexism, ableism, and stigma consciousness. And as a result, they may be less inclined to reach out for support when needed, tending to cope as best they can on their own. Now, group-based, trauma-informed, creative interventions provided by those with experience of the issues explored have been shown to reduce the impacts of minority stress. So the question becomes, how do we support this? How can we provide this for students without unintentionally creating more barriers along the way? So the proposal we submitted to CICMH was to offer low barrier, culturally sensitive arts-based groups to support equity deserving students as a complement to campus counseling services, not to replace them, but as another element that could really strengthen students and give them that sense of not feeling alone, or that they would have to deal with things on their own.
We knew that neither Mary nor I have the lived experience of all the groups that we wanted to serve. So I was able to reach out to campus partners to plan, as I mentioned on an earlier slide, to plan and to deliver the workshops. So that was really important to us, that folks with lived experience were Mary's co-facilitators. So we reached out to Indigenous Education and Cultural Services. I mentioned we had Jocelyn join us in the planning and delivery of that workshop. Student engagement and equity, we had Sienna, who was involved with the planning. Unfortunately, she was sick on the day of delivery, but she was right through all of so many planning meetings with us. And then our mental health peer mentor program, which is where we hire undergraduate and graduate students to be mental health peer mentors. We have a really fantastic senior peer mentor, Funmi, who was able to join us for the planning and the delivery of our BIPOC workshop. So yeah, they were involved in all the steps of the process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we understand and recognized throughout the whole process these four identity groups, as we're like, they are giant umbrellas that cover and contain so many other aspects and identities within them. But for this pilot project, we thought these are four areas that students can understand and relate to in a significant way, just to begin the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for adding that, Mary.
No, it's, you know what, it's like learning. This was huge. We learned so much. And part of it came from this experience, which we're calling the plan and the pivot. So some of you may have remembered that there was a big strike that happened at the beginning of the year. And for us, ready to hit the ground running with these, what we thought, fantastic creative coping workshops, uh, just threw everything that we'd kind of been working on, not out the window, but window adjacent. It was on the windowsill. So we had to embrace these challenges as information and inspiration, and the gift of that experience of having to slow down and return to the present instead of what we'd planned for, but actually respond to the needs in the here and now of students and staff on campus and ourselves as facilitators was incredibly important. So part of that was letting go, allowing ourselves to have that responsiveness to the emerging needs, not just what we'd been told or had been identified in the previous year when we wrote the grant, but to really examine and connect with students about what was happening now and to adjust what wasn't working. One of the things that wasn't working was the title, creative coping. When we talked to students, they were already coping. They were coping as hard as they possibly could, and they were, pretty good at it considering. So what we realized was that something more interesting, perhaps something more flexible and spontaneous that allowed people to be who they were and who they wanted to be and connect with others who understood what it was like to be them would be better. So The Art of Being Me was the title that emerged. During this time, we also realized that registration was dreadful, and Bonnie will be speaking to this later, but the registration process for a closed group was in its own way becoming a barrier for student participation. Students were overwhelmed, and the whole thought of signing up for a group that they really would perhaps like to participate in was exhausting. We had a little bit of people, signing up for the groups, but it was just too much work to check in or follow up on those things. So we made a big decision to shift this group from a registration only group behind closed doors to a drop-in open studio format, and to include friends and allies of the students as well, because we realized that it was an intimidating process for a lot of these students to attend a workshop on this theme alone. And some people were still figuring it out. So allowing friends and allies to come provided support, but also a sense of safety and perhaps even anonymity for those students who didn't want to or weren't ready or weren't sure what they wanted to show up as. Simplifying things. So again, with CICMH's blessing, we realized that we couldn't do the full eight workshops that we'd scheduled. So we narrowed that down to 4. And then we also lengthened those workshops in response to students' needs, their schedules, so they could drop in and leave and come back as necessary as their course load allowed. And then decentering, always looking to explore where we're at and decenter as facilitators where it's appropriate and necessary. But we literally moved the group this time. So instead of students coming to us, to a space that would be perhaps more, we might have thought at one time clinically appropriate, we brought the workshop to them in an open space. And we'll come around a little bit later to describe how we made that space safer and braver for those who participated. Any thoughts, Bonnie, before we leave this slide?
I just wanted to make note of, so you have a visual of what it, this is one visual of what it looked like. So this picture on the left is one of the first floor atriums in one of the large buildings on campus. And this is sort of an aerial view of the setup. We'll talk more about the setup, but just so you get a picture of what open space looks like and not necessarily behind closed doors. So that's it. That's all I wanted to add.
And I guess I'll add alongside that you're going to be seeing a lot of lovely art throughout these slides. We will revisit it when we have a show and tell towards the end of the webinar. But there is that wonderful piece that gave the title to this workshop. Somebody has to be me.
So Taryn was kind enough to share some questions prior to the webinar, and a few people were asking about how did we advertise the workshops. So here's just a few ways that we advertise. We did a little bit of advertising before when we thought we were starting in the fall, and as Mary mentioned, it ended up that we had to postpone the delivery of the workshops until the winter semester. So we went full force January 12th or whenever we came back. What we did prior was connect with our amazing Ontario Tech Communications team. So we have a graphic designer, Henry, who designed the poster on the right. He also designed handbills that we could hand out. So, and as well, digital signs. So a simplified version on we have like a lot of screens across campus. I'm sure many of you do. So we had a simplified digital poster just with the URL to sign, to learn more information. We have our paper poster on the right, so we put those up on the billboards around campus. We have an online events calendar, so the events were on the calendar. The Creative Wellness Hive was continuing monthly, so Mary had the handbills at the Creative Wellness Hive. The Wellness Hive is in our library atrium, so they also have a de-stress desk that's sort of there all the time, even when the hive is not there. So there were handbills there. As well, I sent an email to student-facing staff, so staff who serve students directly, their managers. So I sent an email letting them know about all of the mental health groups and workshops that were on offer for winter semester. And then Mary, you mentioned some faculty were also spreading the word.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we saw, whether through the wonderful promotions that were being done through Ontario Tech or through some of the work that the Living Room was doing, or students, what they were saying, teachers were referring students to participate in this project. As we know, a lot of educators, you're seeing students who might be struggling or feeling disconnected from things. If you have that relationship, if you're lucky enough to be able to have that relationship, we found that students were coming saying, yeah, my prof said this was happening and that I might want to participate. Or groups of students would come over after, their nursing teacher said, this is something interesting. And that was a really beautiful thing to see, especially on a campus that's not known for arts or, humanities or those kind of things. The other thing that in these kind of partnerships with the Living Room at Ontario Tech, as a smaller organization, the Living Room can be so much more responsive and spontaneous. So while Ontario Tech U has the wheels that that must turn before certain things can be promoted, for us, we could just put something out there on social media and tag a lot of the student groups and organizations on campus that we'd had previous workings with, or just to reach out to say, you might be curious about this, come on and check it out. And then from there, nothing cannot, like student word of mouth, trust that students will spread the word about things that they are interested in and want to be a part of. So I thank every single student who assisted in promoting this, but also trusting us and trusting that the group would be worthwhile to participate in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had students who stumbled upon our workshop one week and enjoyed, and then brought friends back the next week, and then brought more friends back the next week. So it was really nice to see that the good word being spread. So, so for those of you that are visual people like me who like charts and diagrams, this was the schedule of our workshop. So they were 3-hour workshops offered from 11:30 to 2:30. We had 4 Tuesdays in a row, and those were our populations. We started offering the workshop for BIPOC students in one area, that picture that you saw. Then we tried another space with for our Indigenous students, and then we went back to the original space for our 2S LGBTQIA+ students, and then our final week on February 10th was for our neurodivergent students. And then the activities were all different. So in the planning process, Mary consulted with her co-facilitators and asked, what would you like to do for this workshop? So you can see there we had beading, painting, weaving, and sculpting through the weeks. So.
So when it comes to how the workshops worked, when we had to change, we just wanted to kind of run down like a nuts and bolts of what that meant. So setting up, obviously, but setting up involves placemaking in institutional and academic settings, which aren't always, it's not always easy. So we tried two different spaces, for example, and one worked so much better than the other, although we felt they were the same. So placemaking, uh, creating spaces within spaces that students can somehow find a home in, even if there are lots of people who are moving past or moving around them. That's part of what we do by decorating, by setting up three, like for us, we had three tables, how we arranged the space, which leads to the invitation. We had a table that all the students had to pass by or pass by to get into where the workshop area was or pass by on their way to wherever else they were going. It was covered in art supplies for the day's activity, and it allowed students to kind of slow down, get curious, get interested, and for us to introduce ourselves and explain things like the group guidelines. This is important, even though it's a drop-in process. For us, it was important to share the group intent and the specific theme of each day, because again, each theme, it was intentional. We were hoping and recognizing that there were intersectionalities between each of these broad populations. But it was important to share those themes and then negotiate consent, to discuss what might come up, to discuss what the students, what they were to expect. And not all students who were at first interested wanted to participate, and that was okay as well. Those who did want to participate and found it beneficial and meaningful for themselves, they came on in. And getting started, this means that they could gather supplies from that table and find a seat at one of those three tables where facilitators were already sitting and located. So they didn't have to be alone or sit at a table by themselves. There was someone there waiting to provide an even like that secondary welcoming wave. And that facilitator, and all the facilitators actually, and that includes volunteers, the peer mentors, everyone who took on those roles within the session, provide a supporting presence through process. So we're all creating alongside students. We're kind of shaking up that hierarchy. It's not so much as leading a workshop as sharing a workshop with people. And so we're making art together, and we're also participating in the conversations, always being guided by what students are bringing up, what's important to them. And the making and sharing segments. So this touches into things like metrics. Students were invited, beyond the conversations that occurred at the table, they were invited to reflect on and share their work through creating artist statements, photographing their work, and providing feedback for us. This was another opportunity for those students who wanted to deepen their reflective process, kind of gather some takeaway points, which we'll be coming to in the show and tell process later on in the webinar. So why the workshops worked. Okay, so I could do a whole thing on this, but I'm not. I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet. So open studio third space approaches are, which is what we were doing in this workshop, are informed by things like community art therapy, peer art therapy, public practice art therapy processes, which enable students to recognize themselves as part of the process, not subject to it. Also, these approaches affirm participant agency. So students are reminded that they are in control of the experience and can share as much or as little as they feel comfortable and ask for what they want and need without judgment. They are the bosses of them. And we learn more through learning about what feels comfortable for them and what doesn't feel comfortable for them. That's okay. We're also normalizing conversations about mental health. We have campus mental health resources on hand, and we're always, in a safe and appropriate way. All the facilitators know that there are parts of ourselves that we can introduce and bring into these experiences. And it's important to model how we perhaps talk about things that we've dealt with or people we know might have dealt with, without, making it about us. And of course, one of the most wonderful things that happens is that as students are sitting and making art together, they start sharing resources, processes that have worked for them. So we can discuss all of these things as we are creating, which is beautiful. And then lastly, again, feedback is welcome, but not required, which is really hard when we've written a grant and we know there are metrics we need to report on. However, that in itself, that sense of strings attached for participants can feel like another barrier. So we invite them, but we're never going to force them. And everything that is shared, they know helps us inform the next project that might come from this. And in the case of a lot of the work we do, support other students through resources that we make to share with students down the line. Okay, I know you might be getting sick of hearing from me. So, well, yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I am. But for now, one of the interesting things that comes up when we're dealing with such a broad idea, this idea of identity is huge. I think one of the things that we found helpful was to consider that we are exploring identity, not defining it. So in moving into this process, we were considering identity as an awareness of a multiplicity of self aspects that can emerge and evolve through life. Not one of us is just one thing. That's just not the case. We also want to consider identity as an awareness of the intersectional nature of these aspects in relationship with others. Who we are changes depending on who we are with, where we are, and what we are bringing into those experiences. There will be things we share, things that overlap, and things that differ. And that's, again, okay. Identity as an awareness of the pressures to label or define oneself that often arise in response to the identities one is assigned, historically, structurally, systemically. We're working with a lot of students who are under a lot of pressure that when they graduate, they have to become something, that's the expectation. I will be something when I graduate from here. So setting even everything else aside, it's important to remind students that those things play a role here, and we have a choice to resist, to let go of, or perhaps to utilize when it is of service to us. And then finally, identity as an awareness of what one understands and values as true about oneself, and that which is unchanging and unchangeable. For each of the students we worked with, there was something that they held on to, at least this part of themselves that they could identify as, yeah, that's me. And being me is enough. So we're going to shift into some show and tell now, if that's okay. So the first workshop was exploring BIPOC identities through beading. And Bonnie, hop in here if you have anything you want to say.
You're doing great, Mary, you're doing great. Keep going.
Okay. So this workshop was co-facilitated by the amazing, the fantastic Fumilola Ogunsie, or as we know her, Fumi. Fumi chose beading as the material to be worked with in this workshop. One, because we haven't met a student yet who doesn't love working with beads. Not yet. And also, beads are, through many cultures, are ways of expressing identity and celebrating identity. Often, sometimes used in sacred rituals as a part of that identity. So we tried to have a range of beads that students could respond to and choose from to either represent different parts of who they might be, or to just express something essential that needed to be said. And while there was so much art to talk about in each of these show and tells, we're going to be focusing on one piece that really stood out for us. And for me, that is this piece that's called Carrying the Past, but Choosing the Future. And the artist's statement reads, "My heart remembers, but my soul keeps moving forward." And this is made more significant for me, for this student is someone who saw these beads and recognized them as prayer beads within her culture. That experience is deepened when they share that they immigrated here as a refugee with their mother several years ago after their father had been killed in conflict in their country of origin. So suddenly, these simple beaded bracelets take on an entirely new and profound meaning.
Our second week, we partnered with Jocelyn, who's our Indigenous advisor, and she expressed an interest to explore painting and in particular exploring the 13 grandmother moon teaching. So she had facilitated a workshop for staff prior, and so she wanted to bring this to students. So the rightmost painting is hers as inspiration for students. And in this workshop, there were circular wooden canvases to paint on, and students were invited through a website to look up the cycle of the moon on their date of birth. So students could see, was it a new moon or a full moon on the date of their birth? And then they were invited to add their own interpretation to that moon. So on the leftmost photo will feature this particular painting. This student loves fish. This student is a marine biology major, so just loves everything under the sea. So they integrated fish into their moon. And the quote in the middle there is from this student who said, "Stars, moons, the ocean, everything in nature is connected to each other. It's important to remember that." Our next week, we explore 2S LGBTQIA plus identities, and I co-facilitated this workshop with Mary. Oh, I noticed my screen just got fuzzy. That's weird. Don't know what happened. I'm still here. There it is. So during the planning for this workshop, I very intentionally chose fiber art or yarn because for a few reasons. One, because it's soft, and a lot of things in life are hard, figuratively and literally. And we touch a lot of hard things all day, keyboards and mice. And so this was quite intentional, like bringing some softness into the day. And as well with weaving, these are projects that you can complete in half an hour, an hour, so easy to complete as people are just coming in for a short time. As well, there's some symbolism in choice, right? Choosing the yarn, choosing the colors is similar to how sometimes we choose, we have, chosen family in the queer community. So we choose those folks who provide safety. We might choose, all kinds of choices we make. So we can bring in those things that we feel pulled to, attracted to, and bring that into our weaving and into our life. So on the leftmost side, we'll feature this artist who said trying is half the battle. So you can see they tried out a couple of different techniques for their weaving, and really neat outcomes there, really neat to look at. And just to acknowledge that we don't have to reach this final awesome, finished product. Really, the trying is admirable and deserves credit. So that was our third workshop.
Process, not product.
Yes, process. Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much value in process. So this is our final. Mary, you'll talk about our final workshop.
As a neurospicy person myself, this was a workshop that was quite interesting to see unfold. So exploring neurodiverse identities through sculpting, which was like a medium modality situation that was suggested by a student, and Miles, our fabulous co-facilitator, embraced it. This was such an interesting day, seeing as a cumulative event, and people who identified with various, identified with each group, coming to this final group as well, meeting people from all of these identity locations, and seeing them externalize different aspects of themselves in fun and playful ways, and serious and quite complicated ways too. The piece that spoke out to me the most was called Putting the Pieces Together. And this artist explained, "Today I decided to put a few shapes and colors together. I got to speak with an awesome group and express myself artistically." And again, this is made more profound for myself by knowing that the student at the front table when we were explaining things, asked us what neurodiversity was. And when I explained, said, and like, which can be many things. When I explained, I gave a general explanation, explained, I'm neurodiverse. And they came in, they sat down with a group of students. They don't consider themselves someone who makes art. But as these conversations unfolded about all of our various intersecting identities, the struggles that were being had with students, how they survived or coped, what inspired them, what helped them get through, the student was able to share that they had never spoken of their diagnosis before in public to anyone. And that this was the first time that they were beginning to see that being neurodiverse was not a deficit, not necessarily an illness. It was actually something that could be used as an affirmation of identity, a celebration of self.
All right, so we're in the home stretch now. We just wanted to share a couple of slides with you that came from our student feedback. So we had a QR code on each of the tables where students could scan and provide their feedback through a Google form. So we had 41 respondents in total. And so just to share a little bit about their responses. So 49 related to identity exploration, 49% felt part of a unique and valued community. 46% felt free to express themselves without fear of judgment, and over half of the respondents were allies. So Mary mentioned earlier the value of having allies participate in the workshops. Related to mental health support, 90% of respondents found the use of art materials to be soothing. 90% of respondents found the art workshops to be very or extremely important in supporting their mental health. And 89% would participate in a drop-in art workshop of this nature. So we really see how the low barrier nature of this sort of open space drop-in it's an invitation to develop skills, to manage stress, and to so that's sort of dipping their toe into mental health support in a low barrier way. So next slide, I guess. All right, so is this one I start? Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So drop-in workshops. So I just want to say historically, and I'm not sure if it's the same at your institution, but at our institution, pre-registered workshops sometimes go well in terms of registration. So we may have 25 or 30 people register. But when it comes time to students showing up for those workshops they registered for, the attendance is often very poor, minimal. So usually between, say, 4 to 7 students will be showing up for pre-registered workshops. However, using a drop-in format approach, we saw probably at least 35 students sitting down each week, and probably at least 50 walking by and asking and maybe taking a few materials with them. So probably 10 times as many students participated. So this is like really important. Yeah, thank you in the comments for printing the same. Yeah. So so it's like was an aha moment. It's like, wait a second, there's something to this, bringing the offering to the students instead of asking them to come to our spaces or how we had what we had in mind. So yeah, meeting them where they are in their spaces allows them to drop in. We had, students walking by who maybe hadn't even heard of the workshops and what's going on here, and they, might show an interest. And so, I really I was really delighted actually in the amount of participation, like at least probably over 100 students, maybe well over 100 over the 4 workshops.
Yeah. And then the friends and allies piece, were you just speaking to that? It feels like there's that interesting thing about safety. Questions of safety often come up in groups like this, and confidentiality and what that means. Part of the negotiation is obviously letting students know that this is place, so people will overhear, and encouraging people to be respectful. I think friends and allies can play a part in supporting that as well. It's kind of preventing, like sometimes it perhaps offering a buffer, but also, that sense of solidarity and allowing students to come to groups with a sense of anonymity if they are, they don't want the focus to be on them. And of course, art making, Bonnie, you can talk about being an important part of a stepped care approach.
Yeah, so as many of your campuses, we use a step care approach to mental health. And so I was just hinting to a minute ago, I really feel passionately that art making is such an important offering in a stepped care approach because it's low barrier, literally like physically low barrier, like just come on in, like we're in your hallway, here we are, but also low barrier in terms of managing stigma that is still associated with mental health conditions, mental health supports. And so I hear that still from students, even in intake. Those students who have broken through the stigma and booked intake, I hear that, we don't, in my family, my culture, whatever it is, we don't believe in mental health or there's so you get the point. There's still quite a bit of stigma, even though we've worked really hard and things have improved, there still is stigma. So this is a really low barrier way of really creating a continuum of low intensity to high intensity support in that step care model. All right, so I think we just have one or two more slides. Oh yes, so the student, this is we just wanted to provide one qualitative evaluation. A student said, I just want to say thank you for having these workshops. They're a great place to just sit down and be free and not have to stress for a while. It's also an amazing place to connect with other students and people. And Mary was kind of put lots of pictures of our students and the work. So this was, just at the end of the survey, we had an empty space where students could add additional comments. So I think the next slide is just our contact info. If you wanted to reach out, if you have any questions, there's our email contact, and we can, we'll share the slides. So we're going to the Q&A slide, but we will share the slides with the contact email with Taryn, who will post on the website. And Mary was so kind to put all the references so beautifully on the final slide, some amazing studies that are informing Mary's work and our work together.
Thank you so much, Bonnie and Mary. This was fantastic. We do have a few questions, and folks, if you have additional questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. We have one question asking about informed consent. So what is your informed consent procedures to ensure privacy and confidentiality so that it's protected with any risk or harm disclosures? Or is that not done in this initiative?
So should I stop sharing here?
If you'd like, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. There we are. So this is a really interesting piece. And we know that students are being referred from student mental health services to come to this. So as in any drop-in scenario, we won't necessarily know who's coming for what, and it's up to them to disclose. Consent is something that we negotiate constantly with students as they're arriving and throughout the process. And to be fair, we are actively, this is something that we're actively exploring about what we can do to improve upon this. The more students we see utilizing these services for mental health supports, I think there's more of an active role to be played here. And there's several really interesting things that we're considering just to deepen that. Now, when it comes to confidentiality in any group or drop-in setting, part of the negotiation, part of that process is reminding students that this is an open space. So what they want to share, and just to be mindful of that. Part of our role is to check in. If things if there's a sense of, this is becoming spicy, or this is becoming emotional, or this is becoming, to check in, is it safe to feel this right now? Would you like to step aside? Would you like to go, someone walk with you? We can, go and check in with student mental health supports, or, whatever that might be. That is always a part of this process as well, so that no student is left without anything. And of course, the resources are in hand, as we were saying. The discussions about the services available on campus, the resources available on campus, and always having materials on hand that people can take with them, or that we can provide for students to share with friends or to take home for themselves. There's still a lot of work to be done in this drop-in setting, because it is an important part, I think, of what we're looking at, especially on campuses moving forward. I don't know, Bonnie, do you have thoughts about that?
I think you did a great job. I just want to say in terms of the sharing of the art, we did ask, yeah, consent to take the photos, and we let them know how the photos of the art would be shared. So there was always the option to opt out of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see there's other questions, so I don't want to spend, I know that we only have 8 minutes, don't want to spend too much time,
Yeah,
but
that's a
yeah,
big one. Yeah.
folks are welcome to reach out by email if there's anything more that they want to know for sure.
Yeah, folks, unfortunately, we might not get to all the questions, but we will try our best. Let's go to our next question. Somebody asked, how many staff are needed to facilitate these workshops?
Yeah, great question. So we always had Mary and a co-facilitator or co-planner, co-facilitator. So I would say minimally two. And then at our tables, we also had, I would say, two-ish mental health peer mentors or volunteers, Mary's volunteers from her placement students and things like that. So I would say minimally two staff and then two student staff or volunteers at the tables doing the art making and explaining. So we always had someone at our welcome table saying, today we are celebrating Indigenous identities. So that sort of welcome and letting them know how it's working. We had someone at the tables, and then, yeah. Mary, anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if this is something that you're considering, I think something to be mindful of is like scale is everything. If the more people you might be expecting, the more people, I think uh, it's better to have more people on hand who are prepared to engage in these ways. Um, if it's a smaller experience, or you're anticipating fewer people participating, you may not need as many supports. For us, we found that more supports are better. Yeah. Wow.
And everybody had a bit of training, not like formal webinar like training, but conversation or yeah, like with Mary ahead of time. So they sort of knew what was going to be expected of them during the workshop.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Another question asking, what informed the choice of location of the space used?
That was
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
this was part of
We
the pivot. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. Part of it, so a space that was open and available for students to stumble upon and discover or remember suddenly, like, oh yeah, that thing's happening, but not so open that there wasn't some sense of like you could sit closer to the wall if you wanted, or you could feel like there's a like a protected environment. So that sense, again, that's creating space within the space. We didn't want to have it in the main atrium of Shaw Building because it's so open. Um, we knew it would be difficult to place make there. We decided to try it downstairs on the lower level of that building because we felt, oh, this will be more private. It'll be great. But then it was almost too private, and there was this, um, and it just felt it didn't feel like there was enough flow or availability or access for students. So the best place, the Goldilocks place, turned out to be in what we call the Energy Research Center, I think, where there were pathways on either side that students were, used as corridors to get to and from classes. And there was an atrium in the center, an area of which we kind of like cordoned off with tables and chairs just to create an environment within the larger environment. Does that help?
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, sometimes it's a bit of trial and error because we knew
Yeah.
this was a pilot, so we were going to make mistakes and we were going to learn. But I think Mary's right, like that, a little bit of free space, but not too free and open, and maybe, yeah, just up against a wall so people can feel a little bit more private and close. So yeah, a bit of trial and error, but we did find a spot that was really sweet, but yeah, so.
Perfect. Somebody asked to reshare the email, so I have put it in the chat for folks. But again, if you didn't get it, we will have it in the slides that will be uploaded on our website.
Yeah.
So I saw that there's a question here in the chat. So someone asked, I'm wondering if you were able to weave in psychoeducation / awareness building directly or indirectly for the friends / allies who were present at these workshops.
Yes, so that played a huge piece. And we weren't just shy with that. We had a lot of pieces at the welcoming table as well, which is part of the thing that helped students determine, like, is this something I'm in? Like, is this for me today? So we would uh, resources available every day, like every session, to kind of just like check in, explore, expand upon things. There were pamphlets on tables, like we had little, even just prompts, like the kinds of questions that people could reflect on with regards to identity and what it meant to them. And then there were the more specific pieces. So I'm thinking like having teachings of around the 13 moons, and then having beyond the day for the 2S LGBTQIA plus day, I found some fantastic resources that I've been meaning, and they're just great about like all the flags and the definitions. And so it created this opportunity to just see within this one thing, there are many pieces, there's many identities within this one identity. And for allies and friends who were there, um, that was, I think, a really interesting thing to see, to witness these specific things and why do they matter so much, and to witness their friends or students that they may have just met that day, to have a deeper understanding of what it was like to be them, um, and to how to support them through that. That's a very shallow explanation to that question.
No,
But yes, we had materials on hand and
yeah.
that we could use when the time called.
Mhm.
Sorry, folks, I just realized the link is not working for the survey. I will keep you posted on that. Maybe I'll end the Q&A with a final question here, asking, did you invite students who were interested passerbys to join, who did not belong to specific affinity groups, who were not friends and allies? If not, how did you respond or educate about who the art making was for?
Yes, well, at our welcome table where we had our materials, curious folks would come up to us all the time and ask what's going on here. So we would be really clear right at the start. Today, we are elevating this particular identity or group of identities. And so we said, if this, like Mary said, the invitation was there. And so if you would like to join us and learn about and participate as an ally, you're welcome to join us. Mary, did you want to add to that?
It was really important to be explicit about that for a number of reasons, because I can't tell just by looking at somebody how they identify. So, you know, having that opportunity, I think that piece around friends and allies, that everyone is welcome, allowed us to be a little more transparent, perhaps, than we might have been about the themes and why they mattered. And we use, celebrate, honor. But this is also about exploring the crunchy stuff too. Um, so students, it's not just a happy rainbows and puppy dogs things. It can be something more to students who need it or want it to be more. There were students who wanted to participate, but then when I was going through the process with them of explaining, realized, oh, this isn't just about making arts and crafts. This is something different. And you know what? No, I don't want to do that today. I just want to make arts and crafts. So people could recognize that this group, this day, this experience wasn't for them. Whereas perhaps the creative wellness hive might be another, like that, perhaps that's a place for them, where there's a little more space and there's a little more, like more space, I should say. But for this group, we were keenly aware of letting people be the judge of whether they wanted to participate, but it was important they knew why they wanted to participate. Does that make sense?
Perfect. I do see a couple more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. But please feel free to reach out to Bonnie and Mary via email. I know that they'll be happy to chat about what their experience has been. So folks, I won't keep you any longer. Bonnie and Mary, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. I think, incorporating creativity and art is a great way to engage students as well as sort of teach wellness and create that safe space for students to exist as they are. So I'm a big fan of this. And folks, thank you so much for joining us today. I know times are busy. I hope the survey works because I just opened it up. I don't know why it was closed in the first place, but I hope you're able to give us your thoughts, and I will be happy to pass on any feedback to Bonnie and Mary as well. So I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, and have a great lunch if it's lunchtime for you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.